back to R&R on Sports. See, I have to leave him room.
Well, you need
to do his Smokey Robinson thing.
You need to leave me room, bro.
We are very proud to be able to always consistently bring you the best guests. Today is no different. We have Memphis, Tennessee's finest sports journalists
This
in the
brother
house.
been at it for a long time too.
Yes, he's a young guy.
Yeah, he's a young guy. He's a JK.
14.
He's a JK.
Yeah.
You know what that
It's
is?
a family business.
You know what that is?
We're talking about,
You know what that is, JK?
What?
A journalist kid. That's it.
Jason Smith, welcome to R&R on Sports, my brother.
I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. Thrilled really to be with Howard more so in this character right here, Larry Robinson. Yes, it's an absolute honor. Larry, it is as well, but I've long wanted to join you guys on this show, so it's an absolute honor to be here.
Appreciate that,
Yeah.
man. What took you so long?
Life, I guess. Yeah. And man, we had a lot go on. Job changes, career change, profession changes. But
You've had a lot happening, man. You have, and you know what? There's been a lot happening in Memphis.
no question.
And let's dive right into it. First of all, just a little background about yourself. Let people know, since this is your first time on, give people the Cliff Notes version of your career.
University of Memphis graduate, came out in 2002 and had the after being an older student. That's a longer story, and maybe we'll get into that later. But yeah, it started at TSU, historically black college up in Nashville.
Okay.
I got up there and got that freedom in '94, and it just turned me out. This man knows my didn't last a semester. How up there, lost my scholarship. Mom and dad said you got to come back home, and so it was 5 years later.
First, you lost your mind, all that.
In one
semester.
He can't have
I saw
lost his mind raw.
the majorettes. I saw we were down the hole, and that bass was playing, and them horns were playing, and I found a new side of me. As a mixed kid, I found some rhythm. First
you
of all,
partied yourself out of TSU?
Within a few weeks, within a semester, and so from that standpoint, my mom and dad, instead of paying for my second semester, since I was on academic probation, said, "No, son, you don't realize what you had. You're going to come home and you're going to come back to Memphis. You're going to get a job and you're going to figure it out the hard way."
Yeah.
And so 5 years later, the Cliff Notes version, I finally realized in 99, I need to get my butt back in school. I tried construction, tried being a security guard for Imperial, realized that those were jobs. I needed a profession.
Right.
So in 99, got back into school. And 3 years later, was able to graduate, get a job with Commercial Appeal in 2003, and it was a blessing. It was an absolute blessing.
Back to school at U of M?
Yep, at the University of Memphis.
Okay.
My mom had worked there, so I was lucky. Didn't have to take out any loans or anything like that. Was able to get half off, and so it was an absolute blessing, to be honest with you. And I've told Larry this. I was that moth that needed to get close to the flame to learn. I was hard-headed, and I wouldn't trade the experience for anything because it made me learn, and it made me appreciate more what I had, appreciate more what you've got to work for. Coming out of high school, I'll be honest with you, White Station been relatively easy. I'm passing tests.
Right.
I'm a B average kid, and all of a sudden I got TSU offering me a free ride.
Right. Okay.
And for the most part, I'd made all the right decisions in terms of my parents, and my younger brother was the bad one. So this is the kid that ain't gonna give us no problem. Got up there and lost it.
Right.
Got up there to Nashville, lost it. It was all on me. But back to the point, I wouldn't trade it because that's the way I needed to learn.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the way God used me. I figured out that was my path.
Absolutely.
And thankfully, after going to school for 3 more years at U of M, like I really picked it up and was ready. As an older student, I was more mature. I understood.
Right.
I got purpose now. Came out after writing for the Daily
So were
Helmsman.
you headed, Larry mentioned you as being a JK, a journalist kid. Were you headed in that direction anyway?
Well, it was the plan when I got back in school. My father had been a local television, started in sports, Les Smith, transferred, moved over to news, and spent 30 years in local media. So my big idea was to go to Memphis, try to get a TV background and follow in his footsteps, try to go to television. A gentleman by the name of Jerome Wright, who was a black neighbors editor at the Commercial Appeal, loved this man to death. Was teaching.
He lives across the street from me.
Man, tell him I said hello. And he, Jerome Wright is responsible in a lot of ways for my career because it was in that features writing class that he said, "Yeah, you could do TV." But newspapers, Jason, offer you more. You're a decent writer. You can come into it. And instead of having those little 2-minute sound bites to tell a story, we'll give you a little longer. Now, this was back in 1999, 2000, when the newspaper business was still looking pretty good at that point before the internet sunk it to the point that it is now, and you're losing subscriptions. But at the time, that sounded real good to me, because I think what I realized later was, much like my father, who was this great storyteller, I loved telling stories. And so doing that in a newspaper setting, in print edition, I just felt it was more fulfilling, it was more gratifying. So long story short, I decided to change over to print, become that. And the CA hired me after I graduated 2002. They hired me 2003 full-time. I had freelance for them, done everything I can to let them know, look, I want this. And in 2003, they gave me a job as a preps high school sports reporter that I spent 7 years in, covering everything from the high school basketball in town that's so rich in tradition. But then you're out at bowling matches. You're out covering St. Mary's volleyball, and But again, back then you had that was part of you paying your dues in the newspaper industry and working up the ladder. So much has changed since then. But I was so happy to be a part of it, man. I didn't care what I was covering. It just felt like.
Hold on, listen. We're talking with Jason Smith, 92.9 ESPN. I want to know, of all that prep sports you covered, specifically basketball, who was the baddest high school ball player
That's a great question.
that you ever witnessed?
It's a great question, because I'd wrestle with this internally.
Okay.
Thaddeus Young is still in the league right now, and is a guy who, coming out of Mitchell High School, father played in the league, married his high school sweetie. You've never seen Thad in any trouble. The only thing you see of Thad is his family on social media. Been the quintessential professional basketball player, who's now, 13, 14, 15 years into his career. Unbelievable. Wow. Great player. You could not stop him. 6'7", 6'8", maybe 6'9" at Mitchell. Left-handed, you couldn't stop him. I covered him all this time at Mitchell. I fell in love with him from the first time I saw him. Plus, he's just such a smart, went to Georgia Tech, super smart. See him now investing, like he's, you know that he's just got a beautiful future even after basketball. All that said, I still can't put him above. You talking about high school player that I saw and covered. I can't put him above Joe Jackson.
Really?
Because Joe Jackson, who scored more points than him in high school, 4 years, played as a starter at White Station since his freshman. Joe was such a competitor. You could not stop him on the high school level. There wasn't any stopping Joe. If the team was down 10-15, McDonald's All-American, the team was down 10-15, Joe gonna score 20, 30 in the second half. He was unstoppable. And see, the Thad you always knew was an NBA prospect. But with Joe, it was, I've never seen anything like this. This guy is dunking on people at 5'10", sitting on their shoulders over at White Station's gym after he dunks on him. This 6'5" kid I watched him dunk on, goes up to state, performs well there. That was the thing about, Thaddeus Young's teams at Mitchell. They always made the state. And it was no fault of Thad's, but they never got over the top. Joe, in the biggest moments in high school, he broke through. And except for one Melrose team that had Adonis Thomas and Chris Jones on that got him and had a great plan for him. But to your point, and one of the baddest scorers we've ever seen come out of here, right up there with Bobby Bingo Smith and all the rest of them. Like, Joe's right there behind those guys as the all-time leading high school scorers out of here. And for me, Joe Jackson, I want to say he's still third or fourth. Bingo's still first. But Joe's up there in that range. And Thad was on more balanced teams, so his scoring was never that high.
I wish you could have seen Bobby
I wish
Smith
I could have too.
in high school.
His numbers retired for the Cavaliers.
God.
Like, he was even a great pro.
He could play anything.
That's what they said.
He was a wide receiver on the football team.
Yep.
He played basketball.
Star.
He did everything on track, and he was a baseball player. Full four-sport letterman.
He was unbelievable.
Wow.
And still is all over the record books, including best scorer we ever had come out of here.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah, him, Newman, those guys, all of them were, it's a whole different level. Johnny Newman.
Yeah.
What was it like covering the likes of, Adonis Thompson, some of the baddest casted this latest era of Memphis ballers? What's it like covering those guys?
Well, it's fun because there's such a rich tradition, that goes back so far here in Memphis in terms of high school ball players, and the way this area has been thought of as just a fertile recruiting ground, a producer of massive talent. So to answer your question, I felt like I was part of a tradition of the next big ones. Right, whether it was Adonis Thomas coming up.
Yeah.
And Adonis is a funny story because if the NBA hadn't had the rule where you couldn't come out, if you could go straight from high school still,
Right.
I truly believe Adonis would have gone out of Melrose. Now, what
Right.
happens is he gets to college and folks see his deficiencies, everything else,
Right.
realize he's really a 6'5" shooting guard that they got to power forward. It didn't work out for him. But back to the point, it was more the tradition
Right.
of covering Memphis high school basketball that, I mean, Howard just said it goes all the way back to even Larry at Melrose, those next big things and sort of who's that going to be. And so every off season it would be, okay, what's the next class coming? Who's the next big class in Memphis? Because you've come to expect that. Now, what I've learned too is it's always cyclical. You'll have down years where you don't have NBA level or even maybe a ton of Division I level talent, but it always here in Memphis, it always comes back. And so I think to answer your question, the best part of it, more so than the games or the legendary coaches, from Terry Tippett, Jerry Peters, big time over at Fairleigh, Jimmy Adams at Raleigh Egypt. It was the fact that you are in something that is become such a staple, such a part of the fabric of the community, and you are getting to cover it. So I looked at it always as I was blessed to be in the position, and I'm part of something that's like, something that's become part of the fabric of Memphis, part of history in a way. And so that's the way.
Since this is a national show, I got to tell people that guy we were talking about, Bobby Smith,
Yes.
graduated from Melrose, went to Tulsa, and went on to play for the Cleveland Cavaliers, and his jersey and his name are in the rafters
Right
at
now.
Cleveland right now as we speak. You are listening to R&R on Sports. We appreciate it, and we'll be right back after this.
Check out all your Kentuckian favorites now.
Back for more R&R on Sports with Jason Smith. So I want us to talk about a plethora of things.
Oh, that's a $5 word.
Yeah. See, you went to school in Kentucky. Y'all didn't have that kind of
No, we didn't. Absolutely,
word.
we did not. We would say plenty. Say plenty.
Let's start out with the unfortunately low-hanging fruit. Let's start out with the Grizzlies in general. Okay? Now, and then we're gonna back into
How long is it
the
gonna
other
take you to ask this
situation
damn
when I
question?
get ready, Larry.
Damn.
When however long, whatsoever amount of time it
Boy,
is.
sitting there just like waiting to
So-
talk, man, and you sitting there going on.
Let's
and
start with the Grizzlies. What's your perspective of how they are doing everything?
That ain't what you
considered?
want to ask, though.
Well, you rushed him.
You want to ask about Ja Morant.
We're gonna get there.
All right, well, go ahead.
Still, boy.
Even with everything going on, I still think they're ahead of schedule, Howard. I mean, you're talking about, between Ja Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Desmond Bain, that threesome, which I truly believe are all three guys who are going to be all-stars multiple times, Bain included.
Yeah.
With that threesome, 23, 24 years old, like you don't see many NBA teams ready to win a championship at that age. Usually happens a little later.
Right.
And so having those three already in the fold, two of them already signed to deals, and the third one with Bain is probably going to come this summer on the max extension. You're still ahead of schedule. All of that said, I can't help but feel like they are wasting an opportunity this year. But set aside winning a championship, because I'm saying I don't believe they're mature enough to do that. But to see, to learn, to grow in the playoffs after winning a playoff series last year. There was an opportunity to either take another step or, more importantly, just learn more, hitting your head up against it. We saw the Bulls do that for years. Couldn't break through the Pistons. All of those learning experiences are key to when you do break through. So I feel like having been a second seed in the West for most of the season, to put yourself in this spot now where we don't know when he's going to be back. Steven Adams now out for looks like the rest of the regular season. We know Brandon Clark's gone now for the rest of the regular season. Dylan Brooks looks like he's hurting his team more than he's helping them. You feel like there was an opportunity to learn more about yourself in those playoffs that may be wasted at this point. Because again, so much is up in the air with when will Ja be back? If we knew that, maybe we get a little bit better feel. But right now, after what felt like, even as recently as last week, you beat Houston first game on that road trip. You're feeling pretty good about where this team is. And all in a night, Ja Morant makes a mistake. Brandon Clark next out for the season. It's come unraveled so quickly, but maybe still an opportunity again to at least get in the playoffs and learn some more about yourself.
And that is what, for me, is conspicuously absent. I'm going to give you two words to me that are conspicuously absent from the Grizzlies. One is wisdom, and two is poise. They have neither. And they're not getting it from the bench. They don't have it on the floor, and they're not getting it apparently from the bench. They have played games that were easily winnable. And it's the same scenario. They get a lead, they can't keep it. They can't build on it, and they relinquish it, and they get beat in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, that's happened a ton this season. Especially on the road.
Is that the scenario, or is it just me?
No, it's
y'all seeing
I think it's
this?
great. It's definitely the scenario. But I go back to, they have no veteran leadership.
But I think you're hitting.
You said that the other day.
They have no veteran leadership. I mean, you think about even the Golden State Warriors. Take out, Steph and Draymond and all that. You still got an Andre Iguodala on the bench. You got Andre Iguodala, consummate professional, so on and so forth. In order for you to make that jump, you got to have that. I don't believe Ja gets into the comment or makes the comments that he does if there was somebody he respected on the bench. What's your take on that?
Well, you're absolutely right about the roster and it lacking veteran leadership. I don't think there's anybody over 30 years old on the roster now that you moved off of Danny Green who could have helped you in that department and was basically saying, this is what I'm here to do in the preseason.
He understood
a guy like
his role.
that, no question about it. And so you lack that. Now, I will push back a little bit, Larry, on this. You need those guys in your locker room, and I believe any team that's going to win a championship or have young guys that need to learn needs that in there. That said, I know for a fact, whether it's Steven Adams or who's in the locker room, or more importantly, smart people outside the locker room, Penny Hardaway, Jalen Rose, there are folks that have tried to talk to Ja that aren't necessarily in the locker room, but that have told Ja, brother, you can't do this.
You can't do that.
And listen, and this is where we know it as men, and especially when we were in our early 20s.
Right.
How much are we listening?
Right.
When we've got that, and especially if the world's been handed to you in the sense that, man, I'm maxed out now. I got Nike coming to me, Powerade, right? And you're telling me that I ought to be doing it like this, brother. I'm doing just fine. And so I remember myself being a lot like that in the 20s. My point is that you can have all the veterans in the world in the locker room. If Ja is not listening, or if he doesn't believe he's got an issue, and what you hear about him is, listen, Ja doesn't, Danny Green said this, that Ja's not running with a crew of the young guys on the team and going out to the party. It's Ja by himself with his guys outside of the team. Bane and those guys, man, they're getting ready for the game the next night. You know what I'm saying? This isn't a group of young guys that are out of control. It's Ja Morant with his crew who's made some bad decisions. So back to my point, I don't think it necessarily matters how many vets you've got in there if he's not listening, if he's not in a place, right, in his maturation where he's realized, you know what, I do need to make a change.
Well, how much of an issue or a factor is T?
It's a great question because I'll put it this way. It's so easy to criticize T. I've seen it everywhere on social media. I would just beat my kid to ass. This wouldn't have happened.
Right.
How y'all gonna blow this like this?
Right.
But what we've got to remember too is, T has been a great father in the sense that he set Ja up for this.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Had a 2-parent household.
Right.
Raised him up. Put him in private school.
Right.
Put him in the position to be able to get all that. That's great fatherhood. And so to try to take some of this criticism that you see and use it to beat T down, I refuse to do that. I do see a man though that much like Ja is learning learning how to deal with all this. Like they go from, let's be real, it's rags to riches compared to what they have now. And so even him dealing with it at this point and what sort of advice I should give to my son, I think he's learning his way through too.
Well, he's become a celebrity too.
Well, and I wonder how useful is that? I do. Because listen, I think T. Morant should have front row seats. If my son makes the NBA, I want front row seats. But what you've got to realize too is there's, when I've got Ja's best friend getting into it with the Pacers and now I'm into it. Or I'm into it with Shannon Sharp and we're becoming a distraction for the team. That's where even with our newfound fame and riches, I've got to realize that this is hurting more than helping. And so from that standpoint, from just the standpoint of just tightening things up, like you're talking about 2 gun incidents now. You're talking about several incidents now where T on the sideline has gotten into it, whether it's with players or with fans. That is not the way of professionals. And I thought Shaq said this best, like, you don't want to put yourself in a position, right, where you're allowing them to take it back away from you. Where it's self-inflicted.
Absolutely.
Not after you've worked this hard. Not after you put parachutes on your back in the backyard to be this athletic, trained to go like you had tattooed. You put in too much work to give it back. And so that's whether it's with the antics with T or more importantly, Ja and his decision-making now as a man. T can't go out and he has raised this young man. They have got to tighten it up. That's where I'm at.
Well, hold on. I'll even push back on you in that even Michael Jordan had a Bill Cartwright. And, with Michael Jordan acting
Oakley was the too. Yeah,
well,
had those bets.
I'm thinking of Bill Cartwright because Bill Cartwright slapped him pretty good when he got disrespectful. So my thing is, if Jordan can get corrected, there's an older person who
I agree.
that literally would be in that locker room and be like, "No, man, you're not going to do this."
I think you're absolutely right. They missed that element.
And they're missing that because the other guys on the team are young. The Desmond Bain is like, "Man, I'm just trying to get my next contract." Triple J. Right.
They haven't been through. They don't know what to say to him.
They
haven't been like those old heads.
Exactly.
I do believe in terms of roster building, you are absolutely right that going forward, they are going to have to get more leadership because you've got so many young ones. It's not just Ja. You're trying to. It's all of those. Whether it's Jaren Bain, all of them. It's such a young nucleus.
Very true.
Veteran leadership can't do anything but help this team. Hopefully, they have more of it next season.
I think there's something that our young people get twisted. That I've said this to Larry, and we've talked about it. Bottom line is, at the bottom of your check, of their check, is somebody else's name. Okay. They don't sign their own checks, okay? And this person's name is on other checks as well, which says that he can pay all of y'all and still have some money. That's how well he's got it. My point is, you work for somebody, okay? And you got to do what you got to do to keep your job.
Exactly.
That's your living. That's what you do. And so this ain't just about you. It is,
and he may have already cost himself $40 million. Because for this max contract that he signed, it's $191 million value. But if you are all NBA this year, first, second, or third team, that contract goes from 191 to 230.
Oh my goodness!
And so because that all NBA team is voted on by writers, sports writers, and broadcasters, they may have already decided, forget how many games Ja's going to miss now. They may have already decided, you know what? This isn't becoming. We've now had 2 gun incidents. No, nothing charged, no charge. But 2 incidents where the NBA's had to come investigate. Some of these reporters are going to look down at that ballot and say, you know what? Not this year for Ja.
I'm gonna tell y'all what.
And it's literally going to cost him $40 million. Quite possibly.
Watch the Powerade deal. Watch the Powerade deal because the Powerade was launching and putting more money in a campaign than they ever had before in the history of the brand.
They were banking on him.
And banking on him to start, and they were going to start this campaign in March Madness. Think they're going to start it now?
It was so unfortunate for him that on that same day they launched that campaign, the Washington Post story comes down with the 2 incidents from the summer where he's hit the 17-year-old kid, at least been accused of that, and the 17-year-old's accusing him of having a gun. That came down the same day. what you doing? Back to the point. Don't let them take it away because you gave it to them.
Right.
Yeah.
And in making those decisions, you're reaching a point where you might do something irreparable. At this point, it's all to me. You can still get past this clearly.
Right.
You haven't hurt anyone, to this point in terms of harm, but there's too much of a pattern. That's what concerns you.
So we got 30 seconds. I want you to talk about your future for you. If you could had your druthers in terms of what the next step would be for you.
I want to be in local radio here in Memphis for the rest of my life.
Is that right?
And I want to get more black men and women in radio, more people of color in radio, brown as well.
Right.
And especially in my hometown, moved here in the second grade, but I call it my hometown, been raised here, all that, here in Memphis, because I feel like that's what God at this point has put me in that platform to do. It's embarrassing,
Right.
the lack of representation, not just sports radio, but in media.
Yeah.
Media in Memphis, the lack of has it gotten better? Sure. We came here in the 80s. My father worked for Channel 5, where we moved here from Fort Pierce, Florida, and there were very few blacks in the media. It felt all white back at that point. It's gotten better, but particularly in the sports radio side of it, it has not.
Right.
And so my hope is that I can stay in that job long enough to where I've got enough pull or enough of people actually listening to me that I can get more people like you guys, more people like me in here saying what we think.
Good for you, man.
Absolutely. Wait a
that's
minute.
my hope.
One last question.
All right, Larry.
Prediction for the Grizzlies this year. What's your prediction?
First round exit.
First round exit.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I'm just so concerned that, last year they won taking Steven Adams off the floor against Minnesota.
Right.
Taking him off the floor and going small with Brandon Clark.
Right.
And sort of running, and they're a team that, Minnesota was still trying to learn. You can't even do that this year.
Right.
Because with Brandon out for the rest of the season. And so, again, not knowing what the health, we may very well have seen the last of Steven Adams. They're saying 4 weeks till a reevaluation. That's the rest of the regular season.
Oh, wow.
So the version of Steven Adams you get won't even be similar. So because, man, the West is loaded now since that trade deadline. A lot going to depend on, Kevin Durant. He slipped the other night, and they said he might not play the regular season. But I'm worried that we could be looking at a first round exit. But I would not be overly disappointed by it if you could get through the season in terms of getting through this year. You figured out, I think, at least in my terms, you don't need Dylan Brooks going forward. You're moving off him and looking to upgrade. We saw the reports where they were trying to get an OG Anunoby or Mikal Bridges. But what clearly is you need an upgrade at that position. Absolutely. And so all that said, with your nucleus as young as it is, even a first round exit, I don't think is overly disappointing. It'll just be part of the process. And I do believe that in 4 to 5 years, this franchise will win a title.
Fantastic.
All right.
What you got to say about that?
But they need more veteran leadership.
That's true.
True
that. Jason Smith, we appreciate it.
It's been an absolute pleasure, gentlemen.
All right, now, look. Let us say this. Don't let it be that this long before you come back. Now, you're welcome to come anytime.
I'm gonna have.
We might make you one of our go-to cats.
I'd be honored. I'd love to, because cool. This man here has helped me more than he knows.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, you talk about God's plan. That man was helping me before I even knew I was going to be headed to radio.
I've been working with him, man. He was like the Beverly Hillbillies when I first met him. We'll be back for more
Gloom, despair, agony on me. Oh,
R&R on Sports.